issue, let me go straight to the page. The issue is non-compliance, tax evasion, environmental non-compliance, etc. So the model is as follows. A firm has taxable income set that for now only the firm knows, and the firm has to pay tax T of Z according to the table. And the after-tax income under full compliance is then R Z minus T of Z. Okay? Turns out that for quite a lot of things, it's the distribution of phi that plays a role, and not the x function and not the z, etc. Okay? Which is the okay. Now, if the firm does not comply, the firm underpays taxes by amount D, the evaded amount. So the net income will be R plus D. But if the firm, we assume that if the firm is audited, and that happens with D, then the inspector said they know everything. Okay? So the inspection is perfect. So the inspectors know that and impose on the firm a penalty, a fine that may depend on D and Z, of course, more than D. First of all, return with OD, and beyond that is the fine. And then the net income will be R plus D minus the fine. So far, very easy. And this is periodically done, say once a year, or if it's an importer, once a container. Okay, or etc. etc. Now, now for the firm, R is not a random variable. R is a number. Z and R are realizations of a random variable that the firm knows. So the only randomness is really whether it will fall or not fall in the sample. So expected utility is the utility of R plus D with probability of not being audited, and the utility of R plus D minus the fine if audited. Okay? And now, what I will tell you what we did with Landsberger 40 years ago. Okay, let me advance that what the subject I'm going to talk about is about modifying this model in which these firms in some homogeneous environment firms are sampled with probability P by another model in which the firms are sampled in a history dependent way. But the behavior of the firms last time audited determines the probability of auditing until the next time you firm for. That's essentially the subject I'm going to talk about. Now, with Landsberger, we were very general tax functions, general fine functions, etc. And the theorems we proved, and the improvement that history dependent does, was in terms of the derivatives at P equals C. So if very little, if auditing is very small, then what's the difference between the different amounts? Okay? But what we did with Noah Maria L is pick up from there and work with a specific utility function, constant absolute risk aversion, and with a specific penalty function loaded there. Okay, where B is the number bigger than 1. And then under this model, solve the problem completely and be able to say what happens. Okay? With Landsberger, we assume that with history dependent, they are audited with the same proportion P as under fixed sampling, and we compare. Now we can ask if that's the case, or perhaps the budget has to be smaller with history dependent, etc., etc. So these are issues that I'm going to talk about. Now, then we work principally with risk neutral agents and with a penalty function that was very convex indeed. What happens is that if we have a linear penalty function and the firms are risk neutral, they are going to cheat infinite. Okay, there is no deterrent. So we are essential. So it's essential they are risk averse. So this is our laboratory conditions. Okay, laboratory, that means we don't think that this is a model for reality, but it's the laboratory on which we work. Okay, they load the penalty, which is quite common in the literature and in general. Okay, and the Cara utility. Okay. The model may be more general. Okay, the authority. What are the costs of the authority? The cost of auditing. It costs C to sample everybody, so they cost CP. Then maybe the loss of society is a multiplier of D. D is how much they cheapen, but they destroy the environment, etc., etc., and they okay. So there maybe not everybody will be cheaper. Maybe there is a certain proportion of the population that unconditionally will declare truth. Okay, but and the models we treated has the possibilities of those two constants here, but we are going to fix C at 0. That means the population is homogeneous, and what they cheat is what the firm loses. Now, what is if the firm statically monitors at rate B, then the firms find D by maximizing the G, which is the derivative you have here, and actually okay. Now, before that, sure.
How come area does not incorporate? How come area does not include B?
Which
The social fund at the top of this slide. There's no B in this formula.
you may be right. No, FD, the fine function in general. Okay. Now watch. The reason that we differentiated expected utility and found a condition, etc., was to show that the solution depends on the ratio of U prime at R plus D and R plus D minus F. Okay? And the reason that I put it there is because that ratio, if we write it as e to the power log of the ratio, what we have is a little Taylor expansion of the function log. And as you see, what we get is the derivative of the log. So what you get here is the Arrow-Bragg index of risk aversion. So this is how you see very clearly that Arrow-Bragg plays here a role in all of these things. Okay. And it also explains why it is so convenient for us to assume that the final response, that means current utility. Okay? So we are going to work with current utilities that will make life simpler. And when we take expected utility and introduce the current utility, even with general find function, we get this expression here. It's interesting. It is the product of an irrelevant term, which is minus e to the minus gamma r, and P and D appear by themselves. That means with current utility, the amount by which they cheat depends only on B, of course, parameters like that, but not on income, not on revenues. Okay, and which is rather funny. What does it mean to make B constant? It means that for current utilities, this is the correct way of cheating. First of all, they all cheat, and they all cheat by the same amount. What this means is that I take the income I had this year, Z. I look at the table, T of Z, how much I have to pay. I subtract the constant D from T of Z. I look what would have been my income so that this would be the tax, and that's what I declare. So all firms underpay taxes by a fixed amount. This is the strange thing that happens with current utility. And they all cheat by the same amount. I'm sorry. So best response D, and
so the amount that they are cheating about doesn't depend on the parameter of risk aversion.
yes, on the parameter of risk. Parameters, yes, don't depend on Z and R. Don't depend.
But you said all of them are lying about are cheating about the same amount.
Same amount when they all have the same cara parameter, the same parameter. And this is the formula for actually closed form formula for the amount by which they cheat as a function of course. If they are audited,
What is B?
huh?
What is B?
B times T is
The penalty.
the penalty. I mean, the penalty is B minus 1T. B times T is return the D you owe and add. So B could be 1.75, could be 2, could be 3. Okay, and here you have if P is equal to 1 over B, then there you get 0. Okay, 1 over B, of course, is the P at which they simply say the truth, etc. But 1 over B is an extremely high P. You can imagine that if B is 2, then this would mean something 50%. Okay, now, and the authority, here you have the expression from which the authority derives P from its costs and everything. Okay, so the problem is closed. And Noam discovered a great piece of data, and this was the IRS 2010 compliance data in which they published everything. They divided the firms into income, into 10, 12 tax income brackets. They reported D, they reported P, etc. So for this graph, as I will show you now, this was quite a laboratory, so IRS divides firms into income brackets and
That's something, but now that you draw to the data. So in reality, I think it's much easier, it is much easier to be cut on a large amount of cheating, on cheating of a large amount of money. When you are cheating about a small amount of money, it's elusive. You can, it's not so easy to be cut, not because it's not about the penalty.
Lots of things that we don't take into account. I mean, we are 0-1 for everything. Okay, either or. Just like we are going not to differentiate little cheating, big cheating. We are going to call.
That's why I'm raising this question of.
Yes, but you are right.
Because it's a critical point about cheating. So
You're
every beginner cheater would know if you cheat about, if you make it too much, you will become.
True. So maybe, but the point of working with current utilities is that it is so clear cut that the question of little cheating, big cheating doesn't enter. It is okay.
But you do say, so you do say that they report P. So what is P in the others? It's actually the percentage.
The percentage of auditing.
Okay, so following Amnon's question, is it true that firms that are being audited may not be caught?
In your model.
No,
No, in our model, those audited that cheated are caught, and they cheated by a number we know what it is, T. So we are in reality something else. Fine. Let me tell you. I'm going to show you now. Going to show you the IRS data, etc. But bear in mind that we are not trying to obtain reasonable conclusions on static auditing. Okay, we are going to assume that everything we develop is exactly optimized by the IRS, etc. But the purpose is to be able to compare it with history-dependent auditing, rather than asking whether it's reasonable or not reasonable. Okay, so that's an important point.
I just wanted to say about
Every time I try
the China is not binary, you know,
Ah.
or not. And the other, then they have.
יהיה נוח לך לקבל את ההצבעות שלך?
זה יעזור לנו.
So the data, they think we should.
The IRS has an idea of what the number should be. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. So.
וחלוקת הנתונים, הפנלטי שמישהו מקבל, זה החברה או הפרם של רואה חשבון.
או יופי, ככה הזאת. אוקיי. אוקיי. Here you have.
יש דוחות של ה-IRS ויש הערכות מה בעצם
ההכנסות ומה אנחנו. זה לא קשור רגע
The IRS data, income brackets 25 to 50K, 50 to 75K, above 10 million. Okay, these are the brackets. And we invented 3 scenarios. B is 1.75, 2 with 2.25. And this is the D reported by IRS, the average D reported by IRS, that we consider fixed, assuming CARA, which is not here. Now, here you have the sampling proportions, 0.6% to 21%, okay, depending on the bracket. Now, assuming that this P is optimal and that all our model is met, then we infer what is the index of absolute risk aversion arrow graph. And as you can see, is not constant at all, but our assumption that is constant is assuming that we are talking of small margins, okay? So we are talking bracket by bracket, then locally we can assume constancy. But by the way, if we compute instead of the constant, we compute the relative absolute risk aversion, then it's constant. Okay, as it should, because the relative index does not have units. The Cara index has unit 1 over money. Okay, and clearly,
I didn't understand, sorry.
Huh?
So you take the data and you calculate
we
the,
take the data,
and you calculate the constant risk aversion that fits,
constant risk aversion or
that would
or
fit
relative
the-
risk aversion
How do you calculate
Okay.
the risk aversion parameter?
Okay. by assuming in the Cara model, okay, that cheating by the amount reported is the correct reaction of the firm to being audited at fraction B. You see, when audited at fraction B and with a certain penalty load, then the firm optimizes D. So we assume that the firm optimized D and the reported D by IRS is the formula I wrote before
I see.
on the
So what
board.
is the meaning of B? You don't have it in the data, you.
No,
So
we
you-
don't know.
you assume it.
Yeah,
If you say the color of each,
Yeah.
each
and
one.
again,
And
let
what
me,
is the problem about assuming that each firm has a constant risk aversion? There is no problem, you're just saying that not all the market has.
not all the money. Okay, but assuming that all
Each firm alone.
Does it really fit within the bracket?
Hmm?
Does it really fit? Do you have a constant gamma within each bracket? Do you have per firm data or do you have
Look.
only data aggregate?
Look, even the value we estimate depends on,
The
of
assumption.
course, on the assumption on the penalty, etc. But they are locally assuming that the absolute, I think the ROC index doesn't change much. It's okay, this is the base
Question
question.
about the data. You have data per firm or is it aggregated?
Aggregate,
It's aggregated.
aggregate.
So you
So
cannot
we
really
cannot-
say if
no.
it's a-
No. No. But again, our main purpose is not make sense, too much sense of this, but to use this as a basis to compare under the same terms with history dependent monitoring. Okay? So whatever we can read from here, fine. Now, but you should see here that the index, the relative index of risk aversion is just about constant, which is what it should be. Okay, this is what economists say, but it is about 5 to 10 times bigger than what is commonly thought
How do you
about
see that it's constant? If this balloon is not.
the lambda. You 16, 13, 25, 26, 29, 30, 30, 30. I mean, of course, this is so noisy that
Yeah.
the fact that all through this, these numbers are all of them double digit with low.
I see, you mean it's.
Order of magnitude.
They're not indicating. The lowest actually doesn't pay taxes. So.
But
if
the
you look at
commonly, but the commonly measured index for normal investors, economic activity, etc., are about 1/5 of the numbers here. So it seems that people are more chicken about evading taxes than about forming portfolios and investing. Okay, that's what seems to be here now.
It's a nice definition, more chicken.
Huh?
They are moral. Why not to give them compliment? Say they are more chicken about cheating than.
Yes.
Not a
Okay,
comparison.
oh yeah, you should turn it around, yeah,
Hey, it's not
good.
comparable.
Now-
גורם של ישראל.
No,
Now, here,
it's not. אני אגיד אתה יותר זהיר בגניבה מאשר להשקעה.
Okay, now. These are the loss of the authority, okay, in each of the brackets. Okay, now, first case I want to make about what we talk about, suppose that the tax office checks less. Suppose that the tax office, instead of checking P, a proportion P of firms, does the following. Every time a firm falls on the sample, if the firm declared correctly, it is sampled from now on until next time for example, with fraction P over 2. So this is real. Nobody's checked more. Those that were found cheating are with the same P as before, but half of that, okay, now I'm going also to assume for this is now to introduce this, we have to think that the static problem involves 1 day at a time, 1 year at a time. But when we are doing these things, then it has future implications. So we're assuming the normal model appears all over in economics that the infinite utility is the sum of the utilities over the years counted by a factor. Okay, so we discount future utility, we add utilities. I'm going to write it. Good. Now, if we do that,
Do the firm know whether they've been inspected or not? Do the firm know whether they've been inspected or not?
assume that yes, that everything is open and known.
They know the
The
probability,
firm,
they don't know.
they know the probability, they know where they are now labeled as good boy or bad boy. Yes.
What happens if you're labeled as a cheater?
Mhm.
If they're labeled as a cheater, then it remains safe.
Uh,
But if you pass the auditing successfully, what is your P? It doesn't matter whether they have passed or
It is half of people,
and the others who are not audited.
depending on what were found in the last time they studied. Okay, every time they follow the sample, we start anew and set the good boy, bad boy label, depending on the behavior at that test. Okay,
And earlier history is erased.
yes. Yes,
To begin with, everyone, to begin with, everyone is bad.
Something, assume something. I mean, we don't have a beginning. We assume that this thing has been going on. Okay? No, we have not thought, we have not computed the situation in which.
No,
I mean,
in
we
the
can
first-
definitely consider that are checked as P. Yeah,
This
this is the default. Okay, so now as you see, the authority strictly checks less than before. Okay, now the loss, this is the loss, the average loss of the firm without counting the auditing cost. Okay, because we have not spoken about C yet at all. This is the loss of the authority, the P over 2 I spoke now. So, but the savings of the authority is more than you see here, because here, the sampling cost is smaller than here. Okay, but this is how and there is a case in which the numbers came essentially the same, but all over you can see that sampling, fixed sampling is counterproductive. Okay, if you give the rebate in auditing to half the auditing to those found, okay, income of the authority goes up.
But what happened if you reduced the auditing probability to all of them from the beginning without conditional on what happened in the auditing?
Very good question.
Reduce the.
We are assuming that this fee has been set by the authority optimally for the authority. So there is a cost of auditing and there is penalties, etc. So this fee is already optimal, but the
now you answer this assumption because in this column, you're reporting on what happened, they divided this fee. For those who will succeed.
let me say
So what
that
happened if you want for?
well, what I'm going to describe soon is fix P1 and P2 best, okay, without relating it to the P of static sampling. I'm only giving an example, okay, a very simple example, but if P1 and P2, if P2 is kept as P and P1 is taken as P over 2, already the authority has an improvement.
But I guess I'm really missing something because the more natural question is, what happened if you did it unconditional? What happened if all of them were?
Then the authorities work.
Then the authority will lose more because this P, as among the fixed P, this is the optimal one for the authority. Okay?
But
Okay. We know the.
yeah, okay, so I have another question, I don't understand it. So if you exchange it and give a lower P to one who violated the rule.
Without.
So what is the, why to give, because you don't assume anything about the type of the film, you don't think that the film that didn't, that was not cut, that didn't cheat, has any motivation not to cheat in the future. So it's like to arbitrarily take part of the film.
You're absolutely right. In fact, those that we call good boys, because they were caught saying the truth, they cheat more than the bad boys because they can allow to cheat more because they are audited less. But it's true. But all in all, they all cheat less to the extent that the authority refers the situation to the other. Okay? But you're true. It's true that those that were caught saying the truth, they are the ones that cheat more. They can afford it. But all in all, there is a tendency for both of them to be more conservative, and we are going to go in. Okay. Okay. We are maybe we're suggesting something, but we don't do with it anything, but maybe we think of the utility function as being the product of two utility functions. One, how does the firm relate to money as such, investment, etc. And the other one, the behavior on cheating. We're trying to explain that the gamma came out a little quite higher than would be that you would expect an economist to see. Okay, so they are more risk averse cheating. That's all. And maybe I'll Noel, you have a reason to speak to this. Not especially.
So this is a good question how to model this situation. So is it known? Is it people already did it in the
No,
how usually they model the preference about cheating?
Excellent question. No, we just thought of this possibility that since we measure risk aversion higher than usual, maybe
the idea of morality.
yes, morality or yes, that's right. I mean, if you lose on an investment, it's a different thing than if you're caught on it.
But not only about monetary consideration.
Right, right. Okay. Okay, so the table you saw showed firms respond to reduction to half. And I said static monitoring can be We call it counterproductive in the sense that you reduce to some of them the good boys, and lo and behold, the authority comes out better out of reducing. Okay, now with Landsberger, as I said, I'm saying it, type 1 firms were audited complying, and type 2 firms audited evading, and type 1 firms are audited with PI, where P1 less than or equal P2, less than or equal the fraction that it made everybody here correctly. And that's it. We assume now in the static case, the distribution of R or what happens next year just don't play any role. But the moment we talk of history dependent, then it has future implications. So this year R has a value, but next year R has a distribution only. Okay, and that makes a difference. So the computations are more complicated, and so say that there are two events, R1 and R2 events in the sense of subset of the set of incomes, money. Okay, so type 1 firms will declare truthfully if R is in R1, type 2 firms if R is in R2. So this makes if R is assumed to be IID across firms and across time, then what we have here is a two-state Markov chain of type 1, type 2. This Markov chain has this Markov chain. If you are in state 1 and if you are in state 1 and you're audited and you cheated, you go to state 2. If you are in state 1 and anything else, you stay in 1. In state 2, if you're audited and said the truth, you go to state 1. So this is the Markov chain. This Markov chain has a stationary probability of being in type 1. Stationary 1 minus the probability of being in type 2, and these elements play a role.
You say that's cheating, but what is the size of D? What is the size?
What the formula we saw before. What turns out, by the way, is that whether in history dependent auditing, the P1, P2, whether the firm in the static, everybody cheated by DP. In the history dependent, they on some incomes they say the truth, on some incomes they cheat. Now, by how much do they cheat? By the same D as if with the PI they were audited statically. So it's the same D function, but it applies with some probability. And what we managed to prove, important by the way, is that these sets R1, R2, on which they declare truthfully, are from some income and above. So those with high revenues declare truthfully, and those with low revenues cheat. This is the optimal behavior of the firms.
This is for what kind of risk preferences?
CARA utilities, loaded penalty, constant load. This is our laboratory. Okay, for this, what I'm telling you now is here there is some literature. Rivas in Spain, by the way, Rivas, first two names are very mixed. It's called Jesus Esther. And a very good friend of mine here, Marta, and he was very happy realizing that I know Spanish and we in touch, and then he started directing Marta incorporating into, he did a PhD on experimentation with subjects, okay? And he saw that the method, this method I'm talking about, is more effective and easier to learn than other things in the research. Nice. But then he started leading Marta in trying to put corruption deals between the inspector and the firm. Okay? But young people, they got in love, they married, so he couldn't be the advisor. So I was a common saver, and that's how I ended up in Spain, having from here a PhD student, but she did not continue. She worked on something else. But this is parenthetical.
Yes. So I'm trying to understand what you just mentioned is the result that big firms.
Yes.
This is one of the.
This is one of the results.
That big
High
firms,
income. Okay.
higher firms
I'll,
are
you
receiving them because they have more to lose, and an essential assumption is the car. Because if you take one,
yes, completely.
it's supposed to be the same.
Completely.
So-
And under those conditions, we're doing all of it. This roll a little
Yeah, it's
more.
not only the same condition, but this is a crucial assumption. Because
Completely. This one, only so that you can see, okay. Sorry if you get a headache, but you will understand here. Here is all the dynamic programming involved. So let's stay with this for a while. This is the core of the algorithm, okay, dynamic programming to find everything. Okay. So say that V1 is the expected optimal, is the expected total utility from now to infinity discounted of type 1, and V2 of type 2. V1 is bigger than V2. So V1 minus V2 is a positive number. Okay? If we knew.
Sorry, I must ask. So type 1 and type 2 is the current situation. It's not each firm.
Each
firms are
firm,
divided
the firm is now type 1.
type 1, it can be changed.
Yes, of course. This is the two-state Markov checker. Yes.
But no, I want to say each firm has not pure strategy, but mixed strategy. Something like that.
Look, the firm, the strategy of the firm is cheat on the incomes that come out of the dynamic programming thing and say the truth on others. Okay, and the theorem is that what's convenient for the firm is to say the truth on years where they have high income and cheat when they have low income.
So the inspector can see.
Yes, but I mean, you have to see it's not that the inspector knows this behavior. I mean,
So he's not aware about.
No,
their
no,
behavior.
we don't think of the inspector as somebody that uses all this as a policy. No, this is like we are substituting this into something general. Okay, that's the idea.
So the inspector is committed to the piece.
The inspector fixes P1 and P2, and the firms fix the sets R1, the thresholds of R1 and R2. And as you can see, there is a formula for Ri. Ri is all the incomes Y at which some object, which depends only on Pi and D, is less than here. Now, so this means that if Y is high enough, it's in the set, and otherwise no. Okay. Now, what is Pi? Pi is the expected utility if times the indicator of saying the truth. That means R is in the set where they declare correctly, plus if not in the sample expected utility if yes in the sample, expected utility, and this is the expected utility today, plus beta times the expected utility for the future, which is, if not checked, same as now. If checked and said the truth, P1, checked and cheated, P2. So this is P, then if we play around with this, we get a nice equation. I mean, A1 and A2 are numbers computable here, and you should see that there is no V1 and no V2 here. So these are objects that can be computed. The moment you invent the number V1 and V2, everything is determined. And now V1 minus V2 is this constant divided by this object. And the Bellman equation and the fixed point equation in dynamic programming says the following, that if we invent this number, go through this, and whatever comes here, we put it back here, etc., this converges to the object. This is dynamic programming, okay? Discounted dynamic programming. And so this is the way to find and solve the problem. So, if firms with arrow and credit index of risk aversion gamma discount future income with discount factor beta, are penalized with underreporting income with penalty low. These are the conditions. We assume income IID over time periods, and with finite expected. Firms dynamically monitored at rate P1 and P2 comply. You can read this is the statement I identified. By the way, if the firms are heterogeneous and we let gamma be the harmonic mean of gamma in the population, results are just about the same.
The exponent is less than 1. Why do you think R is positive? R can be negative?
Yes.
Can be negative.
Yeah. R can be negative. And by the way, the cases that we tried are essentially two. We tried a case with a very sense R. R is shifted exponentially distributed, okay? And then a case which is pairing, which is R is the negative of a shifted exponential, okay? And for that one, the standard deviation has to be smaller than 1 over gamma, otherwise this is closed. You think?
Is there an optimal B? Is there an optimal B?
No, B, we don't mess up with the coordinates. They said B and that's it. B is an external parameter, legal.
Because you may have thought that the tax authorities would have not changed B, they would have changed B. You have cheated before, you will have a higher B.
The question is, who is allowed to change what? Okay, we view B as under the control of the tax authority and B under the control of the courts, part of the litigation. Okay, I mean, okay, but again, our main concern was really comparing the P1, P2 with the P. Okay, so the details are less important for us, and we don't really believe in the results. I mean, the analysis of the IRS data that we did, let me show you now something about that. You will see in a moment. And by the way, these are how to compute in Gaussian shifted exponential gain. These are examples of the formulas needed to do so we will not bother this. Okay. Here you can move from the table. What we did here is we took the IRS data and then we computed what would have to be the cost of checking, okay, to explain optimally in our model, okay? And this cost came out very, very high, okay? But we again, we don't claim that these are the costs, but these are the costs estimated from the static data of IRS that then we plug into the history dependent model in order to compute what under the same conditions, what would history dependent have done. And this is the table of what you get. And essentially, I mean, all the results here are better with optimal P1, P2 than of course with the arbitrary P over 2. Okay, but you can see here that
Why do you think it's very high compared to what?
I don't know. Look, what this says here is that to check, to audit one firm in the bracket from 100 to 200,000, okay, the auditing of that firm will cost $188,000. Okay, so this sets the budget. Of course, the cost is the cost of hiring, it is the retirement, it is everything. I mean, all the costs involved in auditing. But if we take the needed budget and divide it per case audited, we get numbers.
In the beginning, I thought we were talking about firms. Now I think we're talking about individuals, right?
The IRS data is individual, I think. Individuals or also
You
firms.
can see the income is like 25.
Yes, that's right. These are incomes of
25,000.
individuals. These are probably individuals. This is what we have.
So,
Okay, but by the way, let me tell you that, and it's related to something you asked before. What happens if P is reduced? The optimal P is of course never going to be applied. Because you see, if there is a minimum to the loss of the firm, then one thing is clear, functions where they have a minimum, they have this behavior of being rather flat. You can reduce P quite a lot without losing much more. Okay, so I did the computation and in the static data, if instead of the optimal P, the firm, the authority checks everybody at P over 2. Now I get to the point. Then the total loss of the firm increases by 7.5%. So a reduction in budget, 50% of the budget will bring a loss of plus 7. Perhaps it is better to sustain that loss and have half the staff. Okay?
I must ask, I'm sorry about this question, but I don't get it. So what can we learn from this data, given that it's far away from your model, because there is no sense to apply the model to this data if auditing of inspecting a person with income is $25,000 a year, cost to the authority $150,000. So it's clearly that this model doesn't fit the data. So let me understand.
Not necessarily. By knowing the P, often people no, auditing is very, very small.
Yeah, but can you imagine that it's so expensive to inspect on someone who submit his report?
No,
It's like one.
But you have lots of them, P is very well.
So when it's so expensive
By the way, it is not at all clear that the tax authority optimizes P from cost of checking, etc. It could well be that these fees that they check are actually much smaller than it would have been efficient to do. Okay, the authority does not want to hire 3 times as many workers as it does, even if it would produce a better situation. So these numbers here, this C, are assuming that these P are optimal, which are not. I mean, it's quite reasonable that P's are much smaller than they should. But for us, the meaning is that this is a C that explains the empirical P as if it was optimal. And for us, this is a good basis to compare static and dynamic, which is the only thing we want to do.
My question was, what can we learn this data? I didn't. So you said before that you are not, you know that you have a laboratory model, and you know that you cannot suggest offer something.
What can we learn? Okay,
And you only can
continue.
based on the model.
Okay,
So what do we learn? It's a general question. What do we learn as a
I'll show you.
what do we learn from the specific data?
This is the point. Okay. These are examples of the whole computation, okay? And without going into too much detail, but these examples show a comparison between static sampling and the P1, P2 optimal sampling, okay? But in order to compare, we need to keep something fixed. And what we kept fixed is this C that would have made the static P optimal. We put the same C and do dynamic. Okay, so this is the sense in which we use it. We are not claiming that the IRS is optimal.
You would assume some C. What do
But we
from the
prefer to assume a C that would have led optimally to the IRS results. Okay, this looks to us like a better. By the way, it's not necessary. The theory is theory. This is not IRS examples. Okay, this is always C. Okay, so we are plotting things as a function of C, and this is unrelated. But in the IRS data, okay, and so here, for instance, we can see as a function of C that the static sampling will be the blue. Blue is P. If it's very cheap to monitor, then they are going to check everybody. Okay, C is more expensive, less. Okay, now the good boys are sampled with the yellow. The bad boys are sampled with this one. And the stationary average is the red. So you can see that the total fraction sample, it can turn around, it can turn around at very high cost. But all over this region, you can see that the monitoring fraction dynamic is much less than the monitoring fraction static. Okay, and same thing all over. We complying proportion. They are good as a function of C. The good boys comply correctly with, of course, here with high probability because they are checked a lot, and the bad boys comply. So there is quite a lot of difference in the compliance, but you should notice here that the stationary probability of type 1 is very high. So 90% are caught saying the truth in the study dependent. So all in all, this picture shows you, it's an example, but it's quite typical. It shows you the advantage of history dependent versus static.
What is the revenue? R, what is R?
Revenue of the firm. No, this is revenue of this is authority loss.
I mean, the revenue.
I'll tell you. Let me go. But forget the word revenue. It's the loss of the authority under static. Now, under static, this is the auditing cost, and this is the statistical loss. Okay? The total loss is the sum of the two. And then the other two are for dynamic. Okay? Static sampling is quite inefficient. There is not even a reason to sample. Okay? Doesn't give you.
You show that cheating depends on your revenue. And in this model, is there some distribution of revenues?
Yes. Yes. This is the distribution assumption. We make it on R. That means on what would be your net after tax revenue if you declare correct. This is the random variable on which we put, and we assume it is exponential, it's in 1. Okay? And by penalty and the discount factor. Okay. So this is an example in which R is now. Another example that I want to show you has some crazy things happen. Can you go? Yes. This example is the exponential loss model close to explosion. Okay, so close to infinite expected utility, a very dangerous situation. And the reason that we did this example is that in this case, the history-dependent sampling is tremendously better than the static sample. So this example is to show that there is no bound, no theoretical bound to how much better can be the two-state thing up to the
Because they care much more about
Hmm?
it. Because they care much more.
They care much more. It is a way to use the fact that they care much more than in the static, because they have no use for future or distributions. That's it. Jumped over some things, but essentially, I think I would call it a good point. Questions?
So can you summarize what we take from this model? Can you, so it's about comparing the main point is comparing with the static model, right?
The main point is comparing whether this two-state way of sampling with memory, remembering behavior, whether it can make a difference in the behavior of firms, okay? And in the sense that can the authority save money and at the same time, well, it has to be. If the authority saves money, it has to be because the firms are cheating less. Okay? And the result is yes. But at least, I mean, this is an extreme example in which things are crystal clear. The current utility and the penalty load is a laboratory on which we can say what the answer is. This is what happens here. Okay, but let me tell you.
I think that one point interesting about what you said is that the authorities save money because of the motivation of the firms to be able to cheat more. This is counterintuitive.
That's right.
So firms
Yes,
less
but all in
because their
all,
motivation to cheat more.
but all in all, both cheat less.
Yeah,
all in all,
cheat less.
Yeah.
It's a thing that you give it as a prize to firms that will not come when they test it. You give it as a prize because the probability they will cheat in the future is lower. So you reduce the level of inspection. But your model shows that even if they are not have this motivation at all, the authorities, they don't consider this as, they don't take it as a consideration. Still, there is a point to give it as a prize, even though you know that this will motivate them to cheat more. All in all, the cheating level will be lower. So
Yes.
in this,
All in all,
it's counterintuitive. The model can say something about even reality.
not a priori true. However, I'll tell you that before we did all of this, we have worked with Landsberger 40 years ago, in which I'll tell you what we showed then, okay, compared with this. Look at the expected loss of the authority without counting monitoring cost, and force the history dependent P1, P2 to have a stationary average equal to the static, so that we can compare them without introducing monitoring costs. They're the same. So now, the expected income of the authority is a function of P. Okay, that function of P has a derivative at 0. Okay, how does it start? As soon as P increases. What we proved with Michael under very general assumptions, nothing specific enough.
Isn't it infinite derivation?
Huh? No, it's finite derivative. But the derivative that statements are the same. The derivative at 0 of history dependent divided by the derivative at 0 of static, the limit is bigger or equal to. This was a general theory, okay? That the history dependent doubles plus the income. And now, this was one result. Another result was the following, that
So the history dependent is the other P is P over 2.
no, optimal P1, P2, like we did here.
So it's the derivative with respect to what parameter? But
We put a constraint that the stationary P of the to say Markov chain be equal to the P we use for static. This gives us a one parameter family of pairs P1, P2. There we choose the best one for the authority. That's the one I'm talking. So that is a function of P that has a 0 derivative with ratio bigger or equal to with the static. That's one we have. The other one was that if we take risk neutral and we take risk averse, okay, then the derivatives at 0 and the risk aversion or risk neutrality for static sampling are equal. So in the static sample, being risk averse does not improve behavior of the firms when checked little. Okay. However, the history dependent, this ratio I told you, the derivative under risk neutral is smaller. The more risk averse, the derivative is bigger. So risk aversion is something that is is a property that brings people strictly to behave better even under small p, where static makes no difference what's their criteria. That's what we did then in very general. And what we did with Yael and Noam was take a specific case in which we can take the whole thing out of the zero and solve the
Let me
problem.
understand, it's because in the static model, they make a decision after they saw their income. In the dynamic model, they are still uncertain. The future, what will be the income?
Right.
So
Right.
in the static model, risk aversion
Absolutely.
has nothing to do with the static model. Okay,
Well,
not nothing, the probability of being cut is still there,
yes.
but not the.
The utility itself will make them cheat a little bit. It's true. I mean, if you look in the D has gamma in the denominator. Gamma is bigger than cheat.
Your result refers to any distribution of R. Right?
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
your R can be constant. So you don't have uncertainty about future.
I guess without constant
We-
difference.
We did not substitute constant R. That's right. But I think that with Michael then we tried the constant R, and we got some interesting thing that if P1, P2 have to be as close as possible, but if they are closer than a certain number that was for high income, then the taxpayers revolt and they all cheat and that's it. So there is the case of constant R, there is some example of taxpayers revolt happening. Safe transition in the solution.
In the title, we have also environment pollution, right? So the same model tax.
Well, we think of them as being roughly the same. Okay, that what is paying taxes in income is spending money on technology for not damaging the environment. So
Yes, but
we view it as if it's a tax.
if you invest once in a technology, so then I model you have. It's just a clean technology. It's not like to report or not to report every year.
You are right. I mean, the technology thing is not something that you can decide on the spot.
If I understand correctly, you solved it line by line. So for each income, you have this solution. Can you say something about how to distribute the P's among the income if you have some kind of a budget constraint or a total P constraint?